A poor little girl calls a young billionaire and makes an unexpected request. "Can you be my daddy? Mommy cries every night looking at your picture." What happens next is unbelievable. The rain beat against the window of the small apartment as Claire Morgan opened the dresser drawer for the third time that week. The constant sound of the drops on the glass created a melancholic soundtrack for her thoughts. Her hands trembled as she touched the yellowed photograph she had kept there for 5 years, hidden among old receipts and some cheap jewelry. "Mommy, why are you crying again?" Grace's soft voice brought her back to reality. The 5-year-old girl was standing in the bedroom doorway, barefoot, holding her favorite doll, an old faded thing Claire had found at a thrift store 2 years ago. Grace's blonde hair was messy, as it always was after she played. Claire quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to hide it. "It's nothing, sweetie. I'm just remembering old things." Grace approached with small, curious steps. She always did this when she saw her mother fussing with that mysterious drawer. For all of her 5 years of life, that drawer represented something forbidden, something that made her feel a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Can I see?" Claire hesitated, biting her lower lip. For 5 years, she had kept that photo away from her daughter's eyes, not because she was ashamed, but because it hurt too much to explain. Today, however, with the bills piling up on the kitchen table and a heart too heavy to carry alone, she didn't have the strength to say no. "Okay, but it's just an old photo, Grace." Grace climbed onto the bed with the agility typical of children and snuggled up next to her mother. The mattress sank a little under their combined weight. Claire held the photograph carefully, as if it were a fragile treasure that could fall apart at any moment. In the picture, a man with dark hair was smiling genuinely at the camera. He wore a simple white shirt, but there was something elegant in his posture. His blue eyes were vibrant, even in the faded photo, and Grace was mesmerized by them. "Who is he, Mommy?" Claire felt the tears return, but this time she didn't try to hide them. "There's someone I knew a long time ago." "He looks nice." Grace touched the photo with her small finger, tracing the outline of the man's face. "Why do you get sad when you look at him?" How could she explain to a 5-year-old that this man was the person she had loved most in her life? How could she tell her that he had abandoned her when she needed him most? How could she say that the smile in the photo represented the best months of her life before everything fell apart? Claire bit her lower lip, trying to find words a child could understand. "Sometimes the people we love go away, Grace, and it hurts a lot. But why did he go away?" The innocent question cut through Claire's heart like a blade. She couldn't answer. Instead, she hugged her daughter tighter, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo in her blonde hair. Grace had the same hair color she had as a child, before life had darkened it. Grace watched her mother in silence for a few seconds, sensing her sadness. Then, with the determination typical of children who want to solve all the world's problems, she took the photo from Claire's hands. "Can I keep it today?" "Grace, that's not a good idea. Please, Mommy, I promise I'll take good care of it. I really promise." Claire sighed. Maybe it was better to let her daughter satisfy her curiosity. Hiding things never fully worked, especially with a smart child like Grace. "All right, but you can't take it out of the house, understand? And if anything happens to the photo, nothing will happen, Mommy. I promise." Grace nodded enthusiastically and ran to her room, holding the photograph as if it were a treasure. Claire remained seated on the bed, looking at the open drawer. Inside, besides some cheap jewelry and important documents, was Grace's birth certificate. The father's name was blank, just as she had requested at the hospital. In the kitchen, the bills were waiting for her as always. Overdue rent, a power bill with a shut-off notice, the grocery store card at its limit. Claire worked as a housekeeper in 3 different houses, waking up at 5 in the morning and only returning home at 7 at night. Even so, the money was never enough. Especially now, with Grace needing new clothes for school and the medicine for her asthma getting more and more expensive. She stood up and went to the kitchen, where she spread the bills on the small table. She did the math for the 10th time, hoping the numbers would magically transform into something more positive. They didn't. "How am I going to pay for all this?" she muttered to herself, running her hands through her hair. Grace needs new shoes, and I don't even have money for next month's rent. While Claire tried to reorganize the bills, Grace was in her room, examining the photograph with the attention of a little detective. Sitting on the floor among her scattered dolls, she observed every detail of the image. The man in the photo had a smile that made her feel strangely safe. There was something in his eyes that reminded her. She didn't know of what. Maybe it was kindness, or maybe it was just her childish imagination. It was then that, moved by curiosity, she turned the photo over. On the back of the photograph, written in blue ink already faded by time, was a name in cursive, Nathan Carter. Just below it, in the same handwriting, was a sequence of numbers that Grace recognized immediately. Grace frowned, concentrating. She had learned to recognize numbers in school, and knew that those digits looked like the phone number her mom used to call Martha, the kind neighbor who sometimes looked after her when Claire had to work late. The girl glanced at her bedroom door, hearing her mother's worried whispers in the kitchen. Claire was talking to herself again, as she always did when the bills didn't add up. Grace had learned to recognize these moments, her mother's low, anguished voice, the sound of papers being shuffled repeatedly, the long, sad sighs. I don't know what to do anymore. Grace needs new shoes and I have no money. How am I going to manage? Grace felt a pang in her chest. She knew her mother was suffering because of money. Several times she had pretended not to be hungry so that Claire could save on food. Other times, she had asked for no birthday presents, saying she didn't need anything. She looked at the photo again, then at the numbers written on the back. An idea began to form in her small but determined mind. If that man made her mum cry, maybe he knew why. Maybe he could explain, maybe he could help. With the simple logic of a child who wants to solve adult problems, Grace got up and went to her mother's room. She picked up the cordless phone from the nightstand and returned to her room, closing the door slowly so as not to make a sound. Sitting on the floor again, among her dolls that seemed to watch her with curiosity, she looked at the numbers one last time. Her heart was beating fast. She had never called a stranger before, but this didn't feel exactly like calling a stranger. After all, her mom had his picture. With her small fingers, she dialed the numbers written on the back of the photo. Each digit sounded like a small beep on the phone. When she finished, she pressed the green button and brought the receiver to her ear. The phone rang once, twice. Grace held her breath. Hello? The voice was deep, masculine, but not scary. There was something gentle about it that made Grace feel a little less nervous. Hello? Is anyone there? Hi, Grace whispered, her voice barely audible. Hi, sweetie. Who's speaking? Grace liked that he had called her sweetie. Her mom always called her that when she was being affectionate. My name is Grace. Across town, in the elegant office of a high-rise building, Nathan Carter was reviewing construction contracts. His desk was covered with blueprints and important documents. The call interrupted him in the middle of a complicated clause, but something in the child's voice made him stop what he was doing completely. Grace. Nathan placed his pen on the desk and leaned back in his leather chair. Did you dial the wrong number, little one? No, sir. I have a picture of you. Nathan felt the world stop around him. The sound of the traffic below, the humming air conditioner, the voices of employees in the hallway, everything went silent. Slowly, he leaned forward, pressing the phone against his ear. A picture of me. Yes, you're smiling and wearing a white shirt. Your name is written on the back. Nathan's hands began to tremble. Only one person had a picture of him with his name written on the back. A person who had disappeared from his life 6 years ago, without explanation, without a goodbye, leaving only a void he could never fill. Nathan stood up from his chair, walking to the window of his 25th floor office. Below, the city bustled with cars and people, but he could only think of a woman with brown hair and green eyes who had vanished from his life like smoke. Grace, he said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the whirlwind of emotions. Where did you get that photo? It's my mommy's. She cries every night when she looks at you. The words hit Nathan like a punch straight to the chest. He leaned against the window, trying to process the information. Claire still thought about him. Claire still cried for him. What's your mummy's name, Grace? Claire Morgan. The phone almost slipped from Nathan's hand. Claire. After all these years of searching, of hired investigators, of sleepless nights wondering where she was, finally a lead. His mind went blank for a few seconds, his heart racing as if he had run a marathon. "Grace," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "why did you call me?" "Because my mommy cries every night when she looks at your picture. She gets really sad and we don't have any money. Can you be my daddy?" The question struck Nathan like lightning. He leaned completely against the window, his legs nearly giving out. A 5-year-old child was on the other end of the line, asking the most complicated question he could ever imagine. A question he didn't even know he had been waiting to hear. "Grace, is your mommy home?" "Yes, she's in the kitchen, shuffling papers and talking to herself about the bills." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. He needed more information, but he couldn't pressure a 5-year-old. He couldn't scare her. "Listen, Grace, don't tell your mommy you called me, okay? At least not right now." "Why?" Nathan thought quickly. How could he explain the complexity of the situation to a child? How could he say that he had no idea what had happened between him and Claire, and that an unexpected call could complicate things even more? Because sometimes adults need time to understand things. "Can you keep a secret?" "I can. I'm very good at keeping secrets. One time I kept the secret about Mommy's birthday present for 2 whole weeks. Nathan almost smiled, despite the tension. "You're a very smart girl, Grace." "Thank you. My teacher always says so." "Grace," Nathan said, trying to hide the anxiety in his voice, "where do you live?" The girl hesitated. My mommy said I'm not supposed to tell strangers where we live." "Your mommy is right. You are a very smart girl, Grace." Nathan sighed softly. He needed more information, but he couldn't pressure a 5-year-old. He couldn't scare her or make her disobey her mother. "Grace, I have to go now, but thank you for calling me. Are you going to help my mommy?" The simple question carried so much weight that Nathan felt his chest tighten. "I'm going to try, little one. I promise I'll try." "Thank you, Mr. Nathan. You can just call me Nathan, Grace." "Okay, bye, Nathan." "Bye, Grace." Nathan kept holding the phone even after the call ended. His mind was working frantically, processing every word he had heard. Claire was alive. She was in the Oakwood neighborhood. She had a 5-year-old daughter who was asking if he could be her father. He returned to his desk, but couldn't focus on the contracts. Instead, he opened his laptop and started searching for information on private investigators. Nathan Carter was a successful man. At 32, he owned a prosperous construction company. He had money, influence, and resources. But none of that had been enough to find Claire when she disappeared. Now, finally, he had a real lead. As he searched, his mind kept returning to Grace's voice. There was something familiar in her intonation, a cadence that reminded him of, but he pushed those thoughts away. He couldn't speculate. Not yet. He picked up the phone and dialed Marcus, the investigator he had hired years ago to find Claire. "Marcus, it's Nathan Carter. I need you to reopen that case." "Yes, Claire Morgan. I have new information." Across town, Grace carefully tucked the photograph among her dolls and left her room. In the kitchen, she found Claire still bent over the bills, her head in her hands. "Mommy, are you okay?" Claire lifted her head and forced a smile. "Of course, sweetie. I'm just organizing some papers." Grace approached and hugged her mother tightly. "I love you, Mommy. I love you too, Grace, more than anything in the world." As she hugged her daughter, Claire couldn't imagine that, at that very moment, across town, a man was rearranging his entire schedule to chase down answers he had been seeking for 6 years. Nathan spent a sleepless night, holding a photo identical to the one Grace had found. The next morning, he knew exactly what he had to do. He needed answers, and he would get them no matter the cost. Nathan couldn't close his eyes all night. After Grace's call, he had cancelled all his meetings and returned home early. But sleep simply wouldn't come. Now at 3 in the morning, he was sitting on his apartment balcony, holding the photograph he had kept in his wallet for 6 years. It was the same photo Grace had described. He himself had written his name and phone number on the back before giving it to Claire, on an ordinary morning when they were still happy. At the time, it seemed like just a romantic gesture. Now, 6 years later, Those scribbled numbers had become the bridge between his past and a future he didn't even know existed. Nathan observed the image under the dim light of the balcony. Claire had taken the photo on an autumn Sunday, in the park where they used to walk. He remembered that day perfectly. She had laughed at the face he made before pressing the button, saying he looked too nervous for a simple picture. "You need to relax, Nathan," she had said, adjusting his shirt. "It's just a photo for me to take with me when you travel for work." How could he have known that it would be one of the last photos they would take together? How could he have imagined that, months later, Claire would disappear from his life without a trace? The phone vibrated on the table, bringing him back to the present, a work message that he completely ignored. Nothing seemed important now, after Grace's call. A 5-year-old child had called him, asking if he could be her father. The question had been echoing in his mind since he hung up the phone. Nathan stood up and went to the kitchen, making his third coffee of the night. His hands trembled slightly as he stirred in the sugar. It wasn't nervousness. It was a mixture of anxiety, hope, and fear that he couldn't name. Grace was 5 years old. Claire disappeared 6 years ago. Even without wanting to do the math, the numbers danced in his head, creating possibilities he didn't dare to fully consider. He returned to the balcony and picked up his phone. Marcus Rodriguez was the best private investigator in the city, the same one Nathan had hired years ago to find Claire. At the time, Marcus had scoured hospitals, employment records, credit card databases. Nothing. Claire had simply vanished, as if she had never existed. Nathan looked at the clock. It was still 3:30 in the morning, but he couldn't wait any longer. He typed a message. "Marcus, I need to talk to you this morning. It's about the Claire Morgan case." "I have new information." The reply came in 5 minutes. "I'll be in the office at 8. I'll cancel my other appointments." Nathan put his phone away and looked at the photo again. For 6 years, he had wondered what he did wrong. For 6 years, he had imagined where Claire was, if she was okay, if she was happy. Now he knew she wasn't happy. Grace had said her mother cried every night looking at his picture. The thought of Claire crying for him stirred something deep in his chest. For all these years, he had assumed she left because she no longer loved him, because she had found someone else, because he had somehow failed as a boyfriend. The possibility that she might have been suffering as much as he had never crossed his mind. Nathan spent the rest of the early morning pacing his apartment, unable to stay still. He showered at 5, got dressed at 6, and was driving to Marcus's office at 7:30, an hour before their scheduled meeting. Marcus Rodriguez's office was in a discreet commercial building downtown. Nathan knew the place well. He had spent hours there 6 years ago, reviewing reports that led nowhere, looking at photos of women who weren't Claire, following leads that turned out to be dead ends. Marcus greeted him with a strong coffee and a curious expression. He was a man in his 50s, with graying hair and eyes that had seen a lot. He gestured for Nathan to sit in the leather chair in front of his desk. "You look like you've been up all night," Marcus observed, pouring the coffee. "I have." Nathan accepted the cup gratefully. "Marcus, yesterday I received a call from a child." Marcus raised his eyebrows. "A child? A 5-year-old girl, Grace. She said she has a picture of me and that her mother cries every night looking at it. And the mother is Claire Morgan." Marcus leaned forward, suddenly interested. "Claire contacted you?" "No. Her daughter found my phone number written on the back of an old photo and decided to call. She asked if I could be her father." The silence that followed was heavy. Marcus had worked on the original case. He knew how much the disappearance had affected Nathan. He also knew that Claire was pregnant when she disappeared. "Nathan," Marcus said carefully, "are you sure it was really a child? Couldn't it have been some kind of scam?" "It was a child, Marcus. She was 5. She talked like a child talks. She knew details about the photo that only Claire could have known, and—" Nathan paused, running a hand through his hair. "And what?" "She said that Claire works as a cleaner and that they don't have money, that sometimes they don't have food in the house." Marcus made notes in his pad. "Did the child say where they live?" "No. She said her mother taught her not to give information to strangers, but they're in the same city. I need you to find them, Marcus." "I understand." Marcus finished writing and looked at Nathan. Do you have any idea what this could mean? Nathan knew exactly what Marcus was asking. If Grace was 5 and Claire disappeared pregnant 6 years ago, but he wasn't ready to verbalize those possibilities. For now, I just want to find them. I need to know what happened, why Claire disappeared, why she never got in touch. Marcus nodded. I'll start today. With what you've given me, the name Grace on her age, the fact that Claire works as a cleaner, I have more to work with than I've had in the last 6 years. How long do you think you'll need? A few days, a week at most. I'll check school records, medical clinics, employment agencies that handle domestic services. If they're in the city, I'll find them. Nathan stood up to leave but turned back before heading out. Marcus, be discreet. I don't want to scare Claire or the girl. I always am. Nathan drove back home but couldn't work. Instead, he sat in his home office, looking at the photo and waiting for the phone to ring. Part of him hoped Grace would call again, but the phone remained silent. 2 days later, Marcus called. I found them, he said without preamble. Claire Morgan, 30 years old, works for 3 different families as a cleaner. Her daughter, Grace Morgan, 5 years old, attends the public school in the Oakwood neighborhood. They live in a small apartment on Flower Street, number 247. Oakwood. Nathan knew the neighborhood. It was on the outskirts of the city, a stark contrast to his own neighborhood. And their financial situation? Marcus sighed. Complicated. Claire has credit card debts, overdue rent and some unpaid bills. Nothing criminal, just someone trying to survive on very little money. Nathan closed his eyes. Claire had been struggling alone for 6 years, raising a daughter without help, working multiple jobs to make ends meet. And he was here, in his comfortable apartment, driving expensive cars afin with no idea she was struggling just a few miles away. Nathan, are you there? I'm here. Thanks, Marcus. Send the bill to my office. What are you going to do now? Nathan looked out the window, in the direction of the outskirts where Claire and Grace were living. I don't know yet. I need to think. But deep down, he already knew what he was going to do. He needed to see Claire again, needed to look her in the eyes and understand what had happened. He needed to meet Grace in person and find out the truth about who she really was. And most importantly, he needed to find out if he could help, if he could, somehow, make up for 6 years of absence and make a difference in their lives. Nathan put Marcus's report in a drawer and decided that tomorrow he would go to the Oakwood neighborhood, not to confront Claire, not yet, just to see, to understand, to start putting together the pieces of a puzzle that had become his life. Nathan parked his car on a parallel street, far enough away not to draw attention. The Oakwood neighborhood was different from what he remembered. The houses were simple, some in need of paint, but there was an air of community that his upscale neighborhood lacked. Children played in the street, neighbors chatted on the sidewalks, clothes dried on clotheslines. He walked slowly down Flower Street, looking for number 247. He didn't have a specific plan, he just wanted to see where Claire and Grace lived, maybe get a better sense of how they were living. Maybe that would help him decide how to approach the situation. The building was small, 2 stories, with paint peeling from the walls. Nathan stood across the street, leaning against a tree, watching. He didn't know what he expected to see, but he needed this moment to process everything. An hour passed. Nathan started to feel ridiculous, standing there like a stranger watching a building. He was about to leave when the building's door opened. A little girl ran out, her blonde hair bouncing as she came down the steps. She wore a simple dress, a little too big for her, and sneakers that had seen better days. Even from a distance, Nathan felt something familiar about her, Grace. She was playing alone in the small area in front of the building, jumping from one stone to another, as if it were a game she had invented herself. Nathan watched her, trying to memorize every detail. She was a beautiful child, with a contagious energy even when playing alone. Without realizing it, Nathan had started to cross the street. He had no intention of getting close, but his feet seemed to have a will of their own. He stopped on the sidewalk, still at a safe distance, and continued to watch. It was then that Grace looked in his direction. For a moment, They just looked at each other. Nathan saw the recognition dawn on the girl's face. Her eyes widened, and she stopped jumping. "You're the man from the photo," Grace shouted, running towards him. "You came." Before Nathan could react, Grace had pulled on the sleeve of his shirt, looking up at him with a mixture of admiration and joy that left him completely disarmed. "Hi, Grace," he said, crouching down to her level. "You recognized me." "Of course. I looked at your picture a bunch of times. You're even taller than I imagined." Grace smiled, showing a few missing baby teeth. "My mommy's not home. She went to work." Nathan felt his chest tighten. "And you're here alone?" "Martha from the downstairs apartment keeps an eye on me when mommy's out. But I'm a big girl, I can take care of myself." Grace took Nathan's hand with a naturalness, as if they had known each other for years. "Come on, I'll show you where we live. There's a bench over there where we can sit." Nathan let the girl lead him to a wooden bench a little further down. It was old and in need of repair, but it was in the shade of a large tree. Grace sat down and patted the space next to her, indicating for Nathan to sit too. "I knew you would come," Grace said, swinging her legs that didn't reach the ground. "I dreamed about you yesterday." "You did?" "I dreamed you arrived in a nice car and took me to get ice cream." She looked at him curiously. "Do you have a nice car?" Nathan pointed to where he had parked. "Oh, that one over there is mine." "Wow, it's really nice." Grace clapped her hands. "Are you rich?" The direct question caught him off guard. "Why do you want to know?" "Because Mommy always gets sad when she talks about money. If you're rich, maybe you can help her." Grace spoke with the simple logic of a child who doesn't understand the complexities of adult life. Nathan didn't know how to respond. "Grace, tell me what your life is like here." Grace became serious for a moment. "Mommy works a lot. She leaves early in the morning and only comes back at night. She cleans people's houses." "And you're okay by yourself?" "Martha takes care of me. She's nice, but sometimes she falls asleep and I stay quiet so I don't wake her up." Grace kicked a small stone with her foot. "I wish Mommy didn't have to work so much." "Why?" "Because when she comes home, she's always tired and sad. And sometimes—" Grace hesitated, as if she were telling a secret. "Sometimes we don't have food in the house. Mommy says it's because she forgot to buy it, but I know it's because there's no money." Nathan felt a pain in his chest. "What do you do when that happens?" "Mommy says I shouldn't worry, that she'll figure something out. Sometimes Martha gives us food. And one time Mommy borrowed money from the neighbor." Grace looked at him with big, serious eyes. "Do you think it's wrong to borrow food?" "No, Grace, it's not wrong. Your mommy is doing the best she can." "I know. She's the best mommy in the world." Grace smiled again. "That's why I called you. I thought maybe you could help." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything he was hearing. "Grace, does your mummy know you called me?" Grace shook her head. "No. You said not to tell, remember? I'm good at keeping secrets. And you didn't think it was strange for me to show up here?" "No!" Grace jumped off the bench, excited. "I knew you would come. When I called you, I felt that you were a good person. And good people don't let other people be sad." Grace's innocence touched Nathan deeply. She had called a complete stranger because she wanted to help her mother, and now she was here, talking to him as if they were old friends. "Grace, can I ask you a question?" "You can. Has your mommy ever talked about your dad?" Grace was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. "She said my dad left before I was born, that he didn't know I was going to exist." Nathan felt like he had been punched. "She said that?" "Yeah, but I always thought that maybe he didn't know where we were. That's why I called you. Can you be my dad?" The question echoed in the afternoon silence. Nathan looked at Grace. Her blue eyes, her blonde hair, the way she tilted her head when she asked serious questions. There was something familiar about her, something that went beyond physical appearance. "I don't know, Grace. It's complicated." "Why is it complicated?" "Either you are or you aren't." Nathan laughed despite the situation. "You're right. But sometimes adults complicate things. Adults complicate everything," Grace said with the wisdom of an old soul. "Come on, I want to show you where we live." Grace took his hand again and pulled him toward the building. Nathan hesitated. He wasn't sure if it was a good idea, but the girl's determination was irresistible. The apartment was on the second floor. Grace took a key from under a potted plant on the porch, a hiding place Nathan found dangerously obvious, but he didn't comment. "Come in," Grace said, opening the door. "Our house is small, but it's cozy." Nathan entered slowly. The apartment was indeed small, a living room that also served as a kitchen, a bedroom that Claire and Grace apparently shared, and a tiny bathroom. But despite its simplicity, it was clean and organized. There were drawings by Grace taped to the refrigerator and a few plants in the window. "This is where I sleep," Grace said, pointing to a single bed in the corner of the room. "And that's where Mommy sleeps." Nathan looked around, trying to imagine Claire living there. It was so different from the life they had planned together years ago. "Grace, would you like something to drink?" he offered, trying to be helpful. "We only have tap water. Mommy said she can't buy soda this month." Nathan opened the refrigerator and saw that it was almost empty. Just a few eggs, a half-full bottle of milk, and some fruit that was already past its prime. "Grace, I know," she said softly. "There's not much food, but Mommy said she'll be able to buy more things tomorrow." Nathan closed the refrigerator, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. Not anger at Claire, but anger at the situation. Anger for not having known. Anger for 6 lost years. They were sitting on the small living room sofa when they heard footsteps on the stairs. Grace jumped up. "Mommy's back early." She ran to the window. "Oh, she's coming up." Nathan felt a surge of panic. "Grace, maybe I should—" But it was too late. The key turned in the lock and the door opened. Claire entered carrying a grocery bag, saying, "I'm Grace, honey, I managed to buy—" She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Nathan sitting on her living room sofa. The bag fell from her hands, scattering a few items on the floor. Eggs broke on the ceramic tile. Claire turned as pale as paper, leaning against the doorframe. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out in a harsh whisper. Nathan stood up slowly. "Claire, what are you doing in my house?" she repeated, but this time her voice was stronger, filled with an emotion Nathan couldn't decipher as anger, fear, or shock. "Grace found me," Nathan said simply. "Oh, what do you mean Grace found you?" Claire looked at her daughter, who was standing between the two adults, confused by the tension in the air. "Mommy, he's the man from the photo. Aren't you happy he came?" Claire closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to control herself. When she opened them, she looked directly at Nathan. "Get out of my house. Claire, we need to talk. Get out of my house." Each word was pronounced with a coldness that cut Nathan like ice. "But Mommy," Grace began. "Grace, go to your room. Now. But I want him to stay." "Now, Grace!" The girl was startled by her mother's tone and ran to her room, closing the door behind her. Claire and Nathan were left alone in the small living room, with the broken eggs on the floor between them, like a symbol of something irreparably damaged. "You have no right to be here," Claire said, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. "Claire, I didn't know you were here, that Grace existed. And why would you? You never cared enough to look—" Nathan felt as if he had been slapped. "What do you mean I never looked? Claire, you abandoned me. You disappeared without any explanation." "I abandoned you," Claire laughed, but it was a bitter, humorless sound. "You have the nerve to say that. It's the truth, you just vanished. You wouldn't answer your phone, wouldn't reply to messages. What else was I supposed to think?" Claire looked at him with an intensity that made him step back. "You know very well why I left." "I don't, Claire. I swear I don't." For a moment, something shifted in Claire's expression. A shadow of doubt crossed her eyes. But the coldness quickly returned. "Fine, it doesn't matter anymore. That was 6 years ago. I raised Grace on my own. I managed to survive. I don't need you now." "But Grace is my daughter. Only mine." Nathan glanced toward the room where Grace had taken refuge. He could hear small sobs through the door. "She's crying, and it's your fault. You shouldn't have come here. Claire, she called me. She's looking for a father. She's a child who doesn't understand how things work, but I do. And I'm telling you to get out of my house and out of our lives." Nathan glanced toward the room where Grace had taken refuge. He could hear small sobs through the door. "She's crying, and it's your fault. You shouldn't have come here. Claire, please, get out." The shout echoed in the small apartment. Nathan looked at Claire one more time. She was trembling with anger and emotion, but there were tears in her eyes. He headed for the door, stopping only to say, "This isn't over, Claire. Not after 6 years." "Yes, it is," she replied, opening the door for him. "And if you come near my daughter again, I'll call the police." Nathan left the apartment with a heavy heart. He walked down the stairs slowly, hearing the door slam shut behind him. When he reached the street, he looked up and saw Grace in the window, watching him leave. She waved timidly, and Nathan waved back before getting into his car. As he drove home, Nathan tried to process what had happened. Claire had treated him as if he were guilty of something terrible, but he genuinely couldn't understand what. His pride was hurt. She had abandoned him, disappeared from his life without explanation, and now she was acting as if he were the villain of the story. But the image of Grace wouldn't leave his mind. The girl clearly wanted a father, and there was something about her, something familiar he couldn't ignore. She was 5 years old. Claire had disappeared pregnant 6 years ago. The questions hammered in his mind. Was Grace his daughter? Why had Claire run away? What really happened 6 years ago? There were secrets there, wounds that hadn't healed. And as much as his pride screamed at him to forget everything and move on, Nathan knew he couldn't, not after seeing Grace crying behind that door. He had to find out the truth, even if Claire didn't want to talk. Nathan couldn't stop thinking about the nearly empty refrigerator in Claire's apartment. 3 days had passed since the tense encounter, and the image of Grace saying they sometimes had no food haunted him. He tried to work, tried to focus on his company's projects, but his mind always drifted back to that 5-year-old child who had called him for help. On Wednesday morning, Nathan made a decision. If Claire didn't want to see him, if she hated him for reasons he didn't understand, at least he could do something practical, something that would help without forcing a confrontation. He drove to the nearest supermarket and filled a cart. Fresh fruit, milk, eggs, bread, cereal, pasta, tomato sauce, chicken, ground beef, yogurt, cookies, everything a family would need for a whole week. When he got to the checkout, the cashier commented on the quantity. "Big family?" she asked, scanning the items. "Something like that," Nathan replied, not quite sure how to explain. He put everything in a wicker basket he bought along with the groceries, something that wouldn't look suspicious or draw too much attention. He drove to Oakwood late in the afternoon, when he knew Claire would be at work and Grace would probably be with the neighbor. Nathan parked a street over and walked with the heavy basket to the building. He looked around to make sure no one was watching, left the basket in front of the apartment door E, and left quickly. On Thursday, he repeated the process. This time with cleaning supplies, children's shampoo and some sweets he thought Grace might like. He left everything in a discreet bag and went away. On Friday, Nathan was preparing the third delivery when his phone rang. It was Marcus, the investigator. "Nathan, have you been visiting the address I gave you?" "Why are you asking?" "Because I have informants in the neighborhood. They told me a well-dressed man has been seen leaving things at the door of Claire Morgan's apartment." Nathan sighed. "It's complicated, Marcus. Do you want me to keep investigating her past or not?" "Keep going. But be discreet." Nathan hung up and looked at the bag he had prepared. Maybe it wasn't the wisest approach, but it was the only way he had found to help without causing more problems. Claire arrived home on Friday night completely exhausted. She had worked at a new house where the owner was extremely demanding and made her re-clean the bathroom 3 times. Her feet ached, her back was tense, and she just wanted to take a shower and rest. As she walked up the stairs, she almost tripped over a bag that was in front of her door. "That's strange," she muttered, looking around. There was no one in the hallway. She opened the door and called out, "Grace, did Martha bring something over?" Grace came running from the kitchen, where she was playing with her dolls. "Bring what, Mommy?" "This bag here at the door." Grace looked at the bag with curiosity. "Martha didn't bring anything. She just went downstairs a little while ago." Claire brought the bag inside, suspicious. When she opened it and saw the contents, her eyes widened. Expensive toiletries, children's shampoo, conditioner, scented soap, toothpaste, all brands she could never afford. Wow, Mommy, where did this come from? Grace picked up the shampoo and sniffed it. It smells so good. Claire frowned. It didn't make sense. Who would leave expensive products at her apartment door? Mommy, maybe someone got the wrong door. Maybe, Claire said, but something told her it was no mistake. On Saturday morning, Claire left for work earlier than usual. The family she worked for on weekends had asked her to arrive at 7 in the morning because they were having guests. Grace stayed with Martha, as always. The elderly neighbor was kind but slept a lot during the day, so Grace usually played alone in the downstairs apartment. Around 10 in the morning, Grace heard footsteps on the stairs. She thought it was her mother coming back early, but the steps stopped on their floor. Curious, she went to the window of Martha's living room and looked out. She saw Nathan walking quickly away from the building. Grace smiled. She had suspected it since the first mysterious bag, but now she was sure. Without waking Martha, who was dozing in her armchair, Grace ran upstairs to her apartment. At the door, she found a large basket full of food. Fruits, vegetables, meat, milk, bread, all fresh. Grace clapped her hands with joy. She ran back downstairs and gently shook Martha. "Martha, Martha." The elderly woman woke with a start. "What is it, dear? Is your mother back?" "No, but food arrived. Lots of food." Martha went upstairs with Grace to see. When she saw the basket, she shook her head, confused. "This is very strange, Grace. Who would leave so much food here?" Grace almost told her about Nathan, but remembered she had promised to keep it a secret. "I don't know, Martha, but now we have food." They brought the basket inside. Martha helped Grace put everything away in the refrigerator and pantry. For the first time in weeks, the refrigerator was full. When Claire got home at 6 in the evening, she was worried. The job had been harder than expected, and she had earned less than she had calculated. The family had decided to deduct the cost of a glass she had accidentally broken. Grace ran to the door when she heard the key in the lock. Mommy, come see." "What is it, Grace?" "Are you okay?" "I am. Come see the kitchen." Grace pulled her mother by the hand to the kitchen. When Claire opened the refrigerator, she was speechless. It was completely full. Fruits, vegetables, meat, milk, yogurt, juice. "Grace, where did all this come from?" "Someone left a basket at the door. Look, Mommy, now we have plenty of food." Grace was radiant, hopping around the kitchen. Claire looked at the pantry and saw that it was also stocked. Pasta, rice, beans, oil, spices. There was enough food for at least 2 weeks. "Grace, who brought this?" "I don't know, Mommy. When I went upstairs to check, it was already at the door." Claire sat down in a chair, trying to process it. First the toiletries, now food. It couldn't be a coincidence. Someone knew about her situation and was helping anonymously. "Mommy, aren't you happy?" Grace asked, noticing her mother's worried expression. "I am, sweetie. It's very strange for someone to leave food at our door without saying who they are. Maybe it's an angel," Grace said with the innocence of a child. "My teacher said that angels help people who are in need." Claire smiled despite her worry. "Maybe it is, Grace." That night, they had a better dinner than they'd had in weeks. Claire made pasta with tomato sauce and ground beef, and for dessert, they had fresh fruit. Grace was so excited she couldn't stop talking. Mommy, tomorrow can you make that chicken you used to make? We have chicken now." "I can, sweetie. And can we make orange juice?" "We can." Grace hugged her mother. "I like it when we have food in the house. You're less sad." Claire felt her eyes well up. She hadn't known that Grace had noticed how distressed she became when the food ran out. On Monday morning, Grace decided to wait at the front door of the building. She had pretended to be playing outside when Nathan showed up on Saturday, but this time she wanted to talk to him. Martha was sleeping, as usual, so Grace could slip out unseen. She sat on the front steps, playing with her doll but keeping her eyes on the street. Around 10 in the morning, she saw Nathan approaching with a bag. Grace jumped up and ran towards him. "I knew it was you leaving the food." Nathan almost dropped the bag in surprise. "Grace, what are you doing here?" "Waiting for you." Grace smiled. "I saw you on Saturday leaving the building." Nathan looked around nervously. "Grace, you shouldn't be out here alone." "Martha's sleeping." I just wanted to thank you. Grace took his hand. There was almost nothing in the house. You helped a lot. Nathan knelt to her level. How did you know it was me? Because you're a good person, and good people help. Grace, did you tell your mom? Grace shook her head. No. She'd be mad, right? Probably. I don't understand why my mom is so angry with you, Grace said, tilting her head. You're nice, and you're helping us. Nathan felt his chest tighten. Grace, sometimes with adults, it's complicated. Everything is complicated for adults, Grace sighed. But for me, it's easy. You're good to me and Mommy. That's enough. Nathan looked at the little girl and saw so much sincerity in her eyes that he could barely speak. Grace, I want you to know that, no matter what happens between me and your mum, I will always care about you. Are you going to keep leaving food? If you need it, yes. Grace hugged his legs. Thank you. Mommy was less sad yesterday. She even smiled when she made dinner. Nathan returned the hug, feeling a wave of emotion he couldn't control. Grace, you have to go back to Martha's before she wakes up. Okay. But can I stay for one more minute? You can. They sat there on the steps, Nathan holding the bag and Grace playing with her doll beside him. For a few minutes, Nathan allowed himself to imagine what it would be like if this were normal, if he could be in Grace's life without all the complication and anger that Claire carried. Nathan. Yes. Can you tell me how you met my mum? Nathan hesitated. Grace, that's a conversation you should have with your mum. But she won't talk. She just gets sad when I ask. Maybe because it's hard for her. Grace thought for a moment. Did you like her a lot? A lot, Nathan answered without hesitation. And now? Nathan looked at Grace, seeing Claire in her features, remembering how Claire used to tilt her head the same way when she asked difficult questions. I still care about her, Grace. And I care a lot about you, Grace smiled. I like you too, you have kind eyes. Nathan laughed. Kind eyes? Yeah. Mommy always says you can tell if a person is good by their eyes. You have good person eyes. Nathan stood up, knowing he had to leave before someone saw them. Grace, I have to go now. Okay. Thanks for the food. You're welcome, little one. Grace ran back into the building, waving before she went inside. Nathan walked to his car with a lighter heart than he'd had in days. He might not understand Claire's anger. He might not know what happened in the past. But one thing was clear. Grace needed him, and he wasn't going to abandon her. Even if he had to help in secret, even if Claire never knew it was him, Nathan was going to make sure that child had what she needed. It was the least he could do. Grace woke up on Tuesday with a burning forehead. Claire immediately knew something was wrong when her daughter didn't jump out of bed as she always did. Instead, Grace remained lying down, her cheeks flushed and her eyes shining with fever. Grace, how are you feeling? Claire placed her hand on her daughter's forehead and was startled by the heat. I'm cold, Mommy, Grace murmured, pulling the blanket up to her chin. And my throat hurts. Claire rushed to get the thermometer. When she took the temperature, the result terrified her, 102.5 degrees. Grace, we're going to the doctor right now. I don't want to get out of bed, Mommy. I'm too tired. Claire called work, cancelling her cleaning day. Her employer was not happy, but Claire didn't care. Grace came first, always. She took her daughter to the local clinic, where they waited for almost 2 hours to be seen. Grace slept in her mother's lap the entire time, waking only when the doctor called her name. The doctor examined Grace carefully, checking her throat, her ears, listening to her chest. He frowned when he noticed her breathing was a bit shallow. Mrs. Morgan, your daughter has a respiratory infection. Given the high fever and difficulty breathing, I believe it's pneumonia. Claire felt the world spin. Pneumonia? But she's only 5. Children can develop pneumonia quickly. I'm going to prescribe antibiotics, but I want you to keep a close eye on her. If the fever doesn't come down in the next few hours, or if her breathing gets worse, bring her straight to the hospital. Claire returned home with Grace in her arms and a prescription in her hand. At the pharmacy, she found out the antibiotic cost over $200. It was almost all the money she had saved for the week. Mommy, why are you crying? Grace asked when they got home. It's nothing, sweetie. Mommy's just worried about you." Claire gave Grace the medicine and put her to bed. All afternoon, she stayed by her daughter's side, changing cold compresses on her forehead, trying to bring the fever down. But by 6 in the evening, Grace was worse. Her temperature had climbed to 104 degrees, and she was having trouble breathing. "Mommy, I can't breathe right," Grace whispered, gasping. Claire didn't think twice. She scooped Grace into her arms and ran into the street, shouting for a taxi. A neighbor who had just arrived home from work offered them a ride to the hospital. In the ER, Grace was seen immediately. The doctors took her to an emergency room, and Claire was left outside, pacing back and forth, desperate. "Mrs. Morgan," a nurse appeared. "Your daughter is stable, but we're going to have to admit her for observation. The pneumonia is a bit advanced." Claire felt her legs weaken. "Is she going to be okay?" "Yes, she will. But she needs constant medical care for the next 24 hours. As Grace was being transferred to a room, Claire sat in a hallway chair and finally let the tears fall. She was alone, as always. She had no close family, no one to share the weight of this moment. It was then that she remembered the card she had kept in her wallet for a week. During one of Grace's previous checkups, the pediatrician had given her the card of a private doctor in case she needed a second opinion. But it wasn't the doctor Claire was thinking of now. In her wallet, along with the doctor's card, was a small piece of paper where Grace had written Nathan's phone number. The girl had copied the numbers from the photo one afternoon when Claire was sleeping. Claire looked at the paper, hesitating. She had sworn to herself that she would never contact Nathan again, but Grace was in the hospital. She was completely alone, and for the first time in 6 years, Claire had to admit she needed help. With trembling hands, she dialed the number. "Hello?" Nathan's voice sounded tired. "Nathan." Claire could barely speak. "Claire, how did you get my number?" "Grace is in the hospital," Claire said, ignoring the question. "She has pneumonia, and I have no one else to call." The silence on the other end of the line lasted only a few seconds. "Which hospital?" "Oakwood Community Hospital. I'm on my way." Nathan hung up before Claire could say anything else. She stared at the phone, wondering if she had done the right thing. 20 minutes later, Nathan appeared in the hallway, still wearing his work suit, his hair messy as if he had been running. "Where is she?" were his first words. "Room 204. She's sleeping." Nathan and Claire walked down the hallway together in silence. When they entered the room, Grace was lying in a hospital bed that seemed far too big for her. She had an oxygen mask on her face and an IV in her arm. She was pale, but breathing better. Nathan stood by the bed, looking at Grace with an expression Claire couldn't decipher. "How is she?" "Stable. The doctors said she'll be fine, but she needs to be under observation." Nathan pulled up a chair and sat by the bed. "Can I stay?" Claire nodded, taking the other chair. They remained there, in silence, watching Grace sleep. Around 10 at night, Grace woke up. When she saw Nathan, her eyes lit up, even with the fever. "Nathan, you came to see me." "Of course I did, little one. How are you feeling?" "Better. But this mask is weird." Nathan smiled, taking Grace's small hand. "It's to help you breathe better. You need to wear it, okay?" "Okay. Are you going to stay here with me?" Nathan looked at Claire, who nodded silently. "I'm staying, Grace." "I'm staying all night." Grace smiled and closed her eyes again, but she kept her hand intertwined with Nathan's. The hours passed slowly. Nathan didn't let go of Grace's hand for a moment. Claire watched them both, seeing how Nathan spoke softly to Grace when she woke up, how he adjusted her blanket, how he seemed genuinely worried. Around 3 in the morning, Grace was sleeping soundly and her breathing had improved greatly. Claire and Nathan were alone in the silence of the hospital room. "Claire," Nathan said softly, without letting go of Grace's hand. "Why do you hate me so much?" Claire looked at him, seeing the exhaustion on his face, the way he held Grace's hand as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I don't hate you," she said finally. "Then why? Why did you disappear? Why do you treat me like I'm the worst man in the world?" Claire took a deep breath. She was tired of carrying this weight alone. Tired of protecting a secret that had destroyed her from the inside out. I believed you were cheating on me during your trips, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Nathan looked at her, confused. What? Your aide told me. Marcus Rodriguez. He came to me and said you were having an affair with another woman on your business trips. That you laughed at me behind my back. That I was just a distraction. Nathan was completely still. Marcus said that. He did. He showed me pictures of you with a woman in restaurants, told me you had been together for months, that you never took me seriously. Claire, I believed him. Why would he lie? He worked for you. He was your right-hand man. I thought maybe it was better if you didn't even know I found out, so I decided to disappear. Tears began to stream down Claire's face. Then I found out I was pregnant. It had been a month since I left. I thought about telling you, but how could I come back after all that? How could I raise a child with someone who didn't respect me? Nathan was pale. You were pregnant. 3 weeks when I left. I found out later. I raised her alone. It was very hard, Nathan, very hard. Nathan let go of Grace's hand for a moment and ran his hands over his face. Claire, I never cheated on you, never. I never understood why you disappeared. I looked for you desperately. I hired investigators, scoured the entire city. What do you mean you never cheated on me? The photos Marcus showed you. They were from business dinners. The woman was an architect from Chicago, married with 2 kids. There was never anything between us. Marcus, I don't know why he did that. Claire looked at him, trying to process his words. You're lying. Claire, I swear on Grace, I never cheated on you. I loved you. I wanted to marry you. But why would Marcus do that? What would be his motive? I don't know, Nathan said, his voice breaking. But I'm going to find out. Claire was silent for long minutes, looking at Grace sleeping in the hospital bed. 6 years, Nathan. For 6 years I believed you had used me. And I spent 6 years wondering what I had done wrong. Wondering where you were, if you were okay. Grace stirred in the bed, murmuring something inaudible. Nathan took her hand again, and Claire saw the gentleness with which he treated her. She's your daughter, Claire said softly. Nathan closed his eyes. I figured. When she called me Amachis, when she said she was 5, I did the math. Why didn't you ask? Because I didn't have the right. You made it very clear that I wasn't welcome in your lives. Claire looked at Nathan holding Grace's hand, saw how he looked at her with so much affection and protection. I was wrong, she whispered, about everything. Nathan looked at her. Claire, no, let me speak. I took her away from you for 6 years. I took you away from her because of a lie. We were both victims of that lie. Grace opened her eyes slowly, looking at them both. Why are you crying? She asked with a hoarse voice. We're not crying, little one, Nathan said, wiping his eyes. Mum, we're just happy because you're getting better. Grace smiled weakly. You're not fighting anymore? Claire and Nathan looked at each other. No, Grace, Claire said. We're not fighting anymore. Grace squeezed Nathan's hand. Good. Now you can be friends again. Nathan smiled, kissing Grace's forehead. Yes, little one. Now we can be friends again. But as he looked at Claire across the bed, Nathan knew that what he felt for her went far beyond friendship. And for the first time in 6 years, he saw something similar in her eyes. Nathan left the hospital the next morning with a clear mission in mind. Grace was better. The doctors had said she could be discharged by the end of the day, and Claire had finally told him the truth about what happened 6 years ago. Now he needed answers. He needed to understand why Marcus Rodriguez had lied to Claire. The Carter & Sons construction company occupied 3 floors of a commercial building in the city center. Nathan arrived there at 9 in the morning, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. He hadn't slept, but anger and determination kept him alert. Marcus Rodriguez worked on the 15th floor in the Human Resources Department. He had been promoted after Nathan took over the company completely 5 years ago. They didn't work together daily as they used to, but Marcus was still on the company's payroll. Nathan went straight up to Marcus's floor, ignoring the greetings of employees he passed. When he reached Marcus's office, he knocked on the door without ceremony. Come in, a voice came from inside. Nathan opened the door and entered. Marcus was sitting behind his desk, reviewing some documents. When he looked up and saw Nathan, his expression changed immediately. "Nathan, what a surprise. I thought you were at home resting. I heard you worked late yesterday." "Sit down," Nathan said, closing the door behind him. "Excuse me." I said, "Sit down." Marcus obeyed, clearly confused. "Did something happen? You look—" "Claire Morgan," Nathan interrupted. Marcus's face turned white instantly. He tried to hide it, but Nathan saw the recognition in his eyes. "Who?" "Don't lie to me, Marcus. Claire Morgan, the woman I was dating 6 years ago, the woman who disappeared from my life overnight." Marcus swallowed hard. "Nathan, I don't know what you're talking about. You lied to her," Nathan continued, approaching the desk. "You told her I was cheating on her. You showed her fake photos, made up a story about me laughing at her behind her back." Marcus turned even paler. His hands began to tremble slightly. "Nathan, She believed you. She left because she believed your lies, and she was pregnant, Marcus. She was pregnant with my daughter." Marcus shot up from his chair abruptly. "Nathan, let me explain." "Then explain. Now." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, clearly panicking. He walked to the window, turned his back to Nathan, then turned around again. I didn't want to do it, but you did. Yes, I did. But it wasn't my idea." Nathan felt a cold chill run down his spine. "Whose was it?" Marcus hesitated, looking at the door as if he wanted to escape. "Answer me." "Your father told me to say it," Marcus said quickly, the words tumbling out. "I was just following orders." Nathan stood completely still. "What did you say?" "Your father. He called me into his office and said you were losing focus on the company because of that woman, that she was getting in the way of your business, your responsibilities." "And?" "He said I had to find a way to get her away from you, that it was for your own good." Nathan felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. "My father told you to lie to Claire. He said it was temporary, that after you focused on the business, after you took over the company completely, you two could work things out. But then she disappeared and you never told me." Marcus shook his head, looking miserable. "I tried, Nathan, several times, but your father said it would be better to leave things as they were, that you would get over it." Nathan had to lean on the desk to keep from falling. 6 years. 6 years of suffering, of not understanding what had happened. 6 years lost with his daughter. "Why did you do it, Marcus? Why?" "Because I needed the job," Marcus said softly. "My wife was pregnant. I had just bought a house. Your father said that if I didn't do it, he would fire me. And I knew he would. You destroyed my life to keep your job. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know it would be so serious. I thought you two would eventually work it out." Nathan looked at Marcus, a man he had considered a friend, whom he had trusted for years. "I don't know your father's exact reason," Marcus continued, desperate. "I was just following orders. He never explained it properly, just said you were losing focus, that the company was suffering." Nathan straightened up slowly. "Marcus?" "Yes." "You're fired. Nathan, please, get your things and get out of the building." "Now." Marcus tried to protest, but he saw something in Nathan's face that made him shut up. He gathered a few personal items from his desk and left the room without looking back. Nathan was alone in the office for a few minutes, trying to process everything. His father, the man who raised him, who always preached about honor and family, had deliberately destroyed his happiness. He left Marcus's office and went straight to the elevator. His father's office was on the top floor, a huge room with a view of the entire city. Richard Carter always liked being at the top, watching everything from above. Nathan didn't knock, he just walked in. Richard Carter was on the phone when Nathan entered. He was an imposing man at 62, with completely white hair, always wearing expensive suits. When he saw Nathan, he gestured for him to sit, but Nathan remained standing. "Let me call you back," Richard said into the phone and hung up. "Nathan, you look terrible. Didn't you sleep? I need to talk to you." "About what and why the long face?" Nathan approached his father's desk. "Claire Morgan." Richard didn't have the same surprised reaction as Marcus. Instead, his eyes narrowed slightly. "Ah, so you finally found out?" Nathan felt as if he had been punched. "You're not even going to try to deny it?" "Why would I deny it? I did what had to be done. You told Marcus to lie to her, to make up a story about me cheating on her. I did." The coldness in Richard's voice made Nathan even more furious. "Why?" Richard stood up and went to the window, his hands behind his back. "Because you were losing focus, Nathan. That woman was distracting you from your duties." "What duties?" "The company, the family, your responsibility as my heir." Nathan laughed, but it was a humorless sound. "My responsibility?" "You were dating a cleaner, Nathan, a woman with no education, no social standing. What future would you have? Claire wasn't a cleaner at the time. It doesn't matter what she was. What matters is what she represented, a distraction, an obstacle to your growth." Nathan was silent for a moment, trying to control his anger. "She was pregnant." Richard turned around. "I didn't know that at the time." "But you found out later. When I was desperately looking for her, you knew I had a daughter somewhere. I suspected. And you didn't tell me. For what? So you could drop everything and go after a child you weren't even sure was yours." Nathan took a step toward his father. "You destroyed my life? You took my daughter away from me?" Richard stared at him without blinking. "I did what I thought was best." "Best for whom? For you, for the company. For you, for your future." "My future?" Nathan laughed again. "What future, Dad? You turned me into a lonely, bitter man. You made me miss 6 years of my daughter's life. You became a successful businessman. The company has tripled in size in recent years. So what? What's the point of professional success if I don't have a family?" Richard returned to his chair. "You can start a family now. With someone suitable. Suitable according to whom? According to you. According to reality, Nathan. According to what makes sense for a man in your position." Nathan shook his head, incredulous. "You don't understand anything." "I understand perfectly. You're emotionally involved and can't see the bigger picture." "The bigger picture. The bigger picture is that I have a 5-year-old daughter who doesn't know me. It's that the woman I loved believed for 6 years that I cheated on her. It's that I lost 6 years of my life because of your manipulations." Richard leaned back in his chair. "And what do you plan to do now?" Nathan looked at his father for a long moment. He saw a man he no longer recognized, or perhaps one he had never really known. "I'm going to rebuild my family. I'm going to win back Claire's trust, and I'm going to be the father Grace deserves. And the company? The company will continue to run, but not under your orders, not after this." Richard raised his eyebrows. "Are you kicking me out of the company?" "I'm suggesting you retire. Before I do something we'll both regret." Nathan headed for the door but stopped before leaving. "Our Dad." "Yes?" "You will not go near Claire or Grace again. Ever. If I find out you've tried to interfere in our lives again, you'll find out that I can be just as ruthless as you." Richard remained silent. Nathan left the room and closed the door behind him. He had discovered the truth, but that didn't erase 6 lost years. Now he had to find a way to repair the damage his father had caused, and he had to hope it wasn't too late. A week had passed since the confrontation with his father. Nathan had spent the last few days reorganizing the company, taking full control of decisions, and ensuring that Richard Carter no longer had any influence over the business. But none of that mattered as much as what he was about to do now. He parked his car in front of the small building on Flower Street, holding a box wrapped in colorful paper. Inside was a new doll. Not just any doll, but a special one he had chosen carefully. It had blonde hair like Grace, blue eyes, and a pink dress he thought she would love. Nathan walked up the stairs slowly, his heart pounding. He and Claire had talked on the phone over the past few days, trying to figure out how to move forward after everything they had discovered. Today would be the day they would tell Grace the truth. When he knocked on the door, it was Claire who opened it. She looked different from the past few days, calmer, less tense. The weight of carrying that secret alone had finally been lifted from her shoulders. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi, how are you?" "Nervous. And you?" Nathan held up the box. also nervous, but happy. Claire smiled for the first time in a long time. "Come in. Grace is in the living room, drawing." Nathan entered the small apartment he now knew well. Grace was sitting on the floor, with colored pencils scattered around her, focused on a drawing that seemed to show three people holding hands. "Grace," Claire called. "We have a visitor." Grace looked up and her face lit up when she saw Nathan. "Nathan, you came to see me." "I did, little one, and I brought something for you." Grace jumped up and ran to him. "A present, for me, for you." Nathan knelt and handed her the box. Grace tore the paper with excitement, and when she saw the doll, her eyes sparkled. "Wow, she's beautiful. Look, Mommy, she has hair just like mine." "She is very beautiful," Claire agreed, watching Nathan and Grace interact. Grace hugged the doll and then hugged Nathan. "Thank you. I'm going to name her Sophie." "Sophie is a beautiful name," Nathan said, returning the hug. Grace pulled away a little and looked at Nathan seriously. "Nathan, can I ask you a question?" "You can. Why do you always come to see me? Why do you care about me?" Nathan looked at Claire, who nodded encouragingly. "Grace," Claire said, approaching, "I need to tell you something very important. Come here." Grace put the doll down and went to her mother, who knelt to be at her daughter's level. "What is it, Mommy?" "You look serious." Claire took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Grace, you've always asked me about your father, remember?" "I remember. You always got sad and said he went away." "Yes. I said that because I was confused about some things, but now I've found out the truth." Grace looked at Nathan, then at Claire. "Say, what truth?" Claire held Grace's small hands. "Grace, my love, this is your father." For a moment, the apartment was completely silent. Grace looked at Nathan, then at Claire, processing the information. "Nathan is my father?" she asked, as if wanting to be sure. "Yes, sweetie, Nathan is your father." Grace was quiet for a few seconds, looking at Nathan intensely. Then, slowly, a smile began to appear on her face. "I knew it," she said softly. "You knew." "I knew it. I felt it when I saw you." Grace ran to Nathan and threw herself into his arms. "I knew you were my father." Nathan picked her up, holding her tightly against his chest. He felt his eyes fill with tears as he hugged his daughter for the first time, knowing who she really was. "How did you know, little one?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. Grace touched his face with her small hands. "Because when you look at me, I feel safe. And because you have the same eyes as me." Nathan laughed and cried at the same time. "Grace, I promise you one thing." "What?" "I'm never leaving again. I'm never leaving you again." Grace pulled back to look at his face. "Do you really promise?" "I promise. I missed 5 years of your life, but I'm not going to miss another day." "But you didn't know I existed, right?" Grace asked with a child's logic. Nathan looked at Claire, who approached them. "That's right, Grace. Your father didn't know because some people lied to keep us apart. But now he knows. Now I know," Nathan confirmed. "And now I'm here to stay." Grace hugged him again. "Does that mean I have a dad and a mom now?" "It does," Claire replied, joining the hug. "And are we going to live together?" Nathan and Claire looked at each other. They had talked about it, but they were still figuring out the details. "We'll figure that out together, little one," Nathan said. "The important thing is that now we're a family." Grace clapped her hands. "A family? Can I tell Martha?" "You can," Claire laughed. Grace ran to the window. "Martha! Martha!" The neighbor appeared at the window below. "What is it, Grace?" "I have a dad. This is my dad." Nathan waved to Martha, who smiled and waved back. "That's wonderful, Grace. Now you're a complete family." Grace shouted back, radiant. "Yeah, a complete family." 3 weeks later, Nathan was standing in the garden of a new house in Oakwood, not far from the old apartment, but on a quieter street, with a yard and space for Grace to play. He had bought the house the previous week, letting Claire decorate it as she wished. The house had 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a garden with flowers that Claire had planted. Grace was still discovering every corner, especially the yard where she could play freely. Claire came out of the kitchen carrying 2 cups of coffee and joined Nathan in the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange when they stood side by side, watching Grace chase a butterfly. "She's so happy," Claire observed. "She is. And you?" Claire looked at him. "I am. For the first time in 6 years, I'm truly happy." Nathan held her hand. "Claire, can I ask you a question?" "You can." Nathan turned to face her. "I never forgot you. All these years, even when I thought you had abandoned me, I could never forget you. Would you still be willing to try again?" Claire felt her eyes fill with tears. "Nathan, I know we hurt each other. I know we lost a lot of time. But if there's a chance, if you still feel something—" "I never forgot you either," Claire interrupted him. "For even when I believed you had cheated on me, even while raising Grace alone and going through all the hardships, I could never get you out of my heart." Nathan smiled. "So is that a yes?" "It's a yes." Nathan pulled her close and kissed her, a gentle kiss full of promises and second chances. When they separated, Grace was standing a few feet away, watching them with a huge smile. "Are you two dating?" she asked, clapping her hands. "We're trying to figure that out," Claire replied, laughing. "I think you should date, and then get married, and then have a big party with cake." Nathan laughed. "A party with cake?" "Yeah. And I can be the flower girl and wear a really pretty dress." Nathan and Claire looked at each other and laughed together. "Let's take it slow, Grace," Nathan said. "First, we need to learn how to be a family." "But we're already a family," Grace replied simply. "You're my dad, she's my mum, and I'm your daughter." There. The butterfly Grace had been chasing landed gently on her shoulder. She stood completely still, whispering, "Look, it likes me." "It came to welcome you to the new house," Nathan said, touched by the scene. Grace ran to them as the butterfly flew away, forcing a group hug in the middle of the garden. Nathan looked at Claire over Grace's head and saw tears of happiness in her eyes. "She's right," he said softly. "We're already a family." "We are," Claire agreed. "Finally, we are." Grace broke free from the hug and went back to playing in the yard. Nathan and Claire remained hand in hand, watching their daughter run among the flowers. "Nathan," Claire said after a few minutes. "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up, for seeking the truth, for giving Grace a chance to have a father." Nathan squeezed her hand. "Thank you for forgiving me, for giving me a chance to know my daughter," Grace shouted from the other side of the garden. "Dad, Mum, come see. There are more butterflies here." "Dad." Nathan smiled, hearing the word. He had waited 6 years to hear it, and now Grace said it so naturally, as if he had always been a part of her life. "Let's go see," he said to Claire. They walked hand in hand to where Grace was standing, watching 3 colorful butterflies flutter around the flowers. "Look how pretty they are flying together," Grace whispered. "I think they came to celebrate our family." The butterflies flew away after a few minutes, but Grace kept looking up, following their flight. "Where did they go, Dad?" "I don't know, little one, but I'm sure they'll be back." Grace took one of Nathan's hands and one of Claire's. "Can I sleep in my new room today?" "You can," Claire replied. "This is your home now. And will you guys stay here with me?" Nathan looked at Claire, who nodded. "We'll stay, Grace, forever." Grace smiled and pulled them both toward the house. "Then let's go inside. I want to show you how I organized my room." As they followed Grace into the brightly lit house, Nathan and Claire looked at each other one last time. 6 years of separation, of misunderstandings, of pain, had finally come to an end. In the living room, Grace sat on the sofa between Nathan and Claire, holding her doll, Sophie. "Now Sophie has a complete family too," she said, making the doll walk across the sofa. "How so?" Nathan asked. "Because before she only had me. Now she has you and Mommy too, just like me." Claire kissed Grace's forehead. "You're right, sweetie. Now we all have a complete family." Grace yawned, the day's emotions finally weighing on her. Can I sleep here between you guys tonight? Just for tonight?" Nathan and Claire looked at each other and smiled. "You can," they said together. Grace snuggled between them, hugging her doll. "I like our family," she murmured, already sleepy. "We like it too," Nathan said softly, stroking his daughter's hair. As Grace fell asleep between them, Nathan and Claire sat there watching her sleep. The house was quiet, but it was a silence filled with peace and happiness. "Nathan," Claire whispered. "Yes, we're home." Nathan looked around, at Grace sleeping between them, at the house that was now theirs, at Claire by his side. "Yes," he agreed. We're finally home." Outside, the butterflies returned to the garden, flying among the flowers that Claire had planted with such care. And inside the house, a family that had been separated by lies and misunderstandings was finally reunited. They were together. They were a family. And this time, nothing and no one would ever separate them again. Nathan fell asleep that night with Grace in his arms and Claire by his side, knowing he had found what he had always been looking for: his family, his home, his place in the world. And when the sun rose the next day, he woke up still there, surrounded by the love he had lost and finally recovered. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.